Good morning, everyone. My name is Manish, the founder of Humanity in Business. Thanks again for joining us this morning. This is our fifth event from our 8-series session on leadership and uncertainty. Today, we're really excited to have one of my great friends, also a former colleague, Jesus Fernandez, who's going to be sharing his perspective on agility. I think that's the buzzword in corporate circles is agility. Everyone's trying to do things faster and quicker. And now with COVID, the issue of agility has even been highlighted even further, purely because you're working in your own house, not really in that normal business team environment. And so kind of getting people to work together closely and be more agile and get stuff done is actually more challenging. So it'll be really interesting to hear Jesus's perspective on that. So we're going to be talking around some of the key challenges that organizations are facing at the moment, but also what are some of the framework for agility, and also what is the link to neuroscience. I think there's a lot of research being done around neuroscience and how important it is to actually facilitate and enable agility. So Jesus will have some great insights around that. But really grateful for you guys to join us. A bit about Humanity in Business. We've been around for around 8 years now. Really focused on showcasing what great leadership looks like. And also we partner with Communitier, which is really around a platform that enables skill volunteering and helps organizations report on their skill volunteering activities. So that's really who's bringing the show today is Humanity in Business and Communitier. So you can log on to our websites and find out a bit more. But without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jesus Fernandez onto the show. Jesus, welcome, mate. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, hello, Muniz, and hello, everyone there.
Awesome, great. So Jesus, you want to just tell us your story, a bit of perspective about you, so they know who you are, and then you want to launch into your perspective around agility and neuroscience and what that looks like.
Yeah, perfect. So my name is Jesus Fernandez, and I actually work in leadership development and in culture. And I've been doing that for around 15 years. It's a real passion. Like it's always been, when you have some kids that they just love figuring out people and how they work, like that was me, And so eventually I studied business, psychology, philosophy, and lately I've gone into the field of neuroscience with beautiful people at the About My Brain Institute, led by the co-founder, Silvia Damiano, who's done some incredible research on how do we bring all of the knowledge that neuroscience has developed over the past century, and that the business community and leadership is desperately needing. And so how do we bring that into the field of awareness of those leaders and companies? And we do it through culture, through some tools. So I'm actually here to talk to you because I think there's a story to tell about, having been in the consulting industry, in the leadership development industry for so many years, I was seeing an opportunity because, firstly, leadership is something that is really hard to measure. Like you were talking in this in this talk about, well, how do you deal with uncertainty? And I'm like, well, if we're doing it well or not, we should be able to measure it firstly, right? And I saw, wow, we're not able to understand the difference, the impact that we have when we're deploying. If we deploy agility across the company, well, how does that look like? How do we measure that we're doing it right or wrong, right? And there were two other things that compelled me to tell a story and to show you what we've been up to. The first one, the second, was about, I keep seeing that when we're talking about leadership, there are so many gigs, so many sort of projects that are launched, but we know the ones that work inside the industry, we know, no, the real work takes years, like to help people grow. If you were to help everybody in your company be more agile so that they can deal better with uncertainty, you're talking about a real change in the brain, in the mindset that has to happen and has to be sustainable. So I was seeing that, wow, there's an opportunity here to make some really good work if we could just get into more scale, more sustainability. And the last part of the story is I figured out a way to go beyond theories, psychology, beyond opinions, into like actually being more holistic, more scientific. That's the much more robust, fact-based. And so that's when you and I initially talked about coming up and talking to your audience, I thought, wow, what a great story to tell, because we've managed to see all of those opportunities and transform them into a
Yeah.
system that can actually help.
Awesome. Well, I love that perspective, but I guess let's just start off with what is agility, Jesus? What exactly does that agility really mean? I mean, what are we talking about here?
So, so when you've got an environment that is uncertain,
Yeah.
right? Uncertainty means that, well, you don't really know what's out there. You're the opposite of certainty. You're just not sure. And so human beings have developed natural abilities that are able to help us navigate those things. And it's not about a new leadership theory, or it's about understanding what are the natural competencies that are going to help us thrive in an environment that is uncertain. And that's where agility kicks in. Agility is the capacity to read the changing conditions in one's environment, and then have the ability to quickly adapt to it. That means that if something's new or different, you're able to learn and change what you're doing real fast.
Right.
The thing that when we look at the neuroscience behind it and the work that the About My Brain Institute does, and the theories that Silvia Damiano is proposing, we need to look at this as an ability, at a competency that can be developed. Agility is a competency that you can have more of, or that you can maximize in order to that you can maximize within your business, within your teams, within yourself,
Right.
in order to counteract the uncertainty that we normally see out in the world. That makes sense.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, that totally makes sense. So, is a big part of that around teaming and how people work together?
So actually, I think that it goes beyond that, yes, but I wanted to offer you a wider perspective than just teaming.
Right.
Because if you think about not just uncertainty, but have you heard of the term VUCA?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, if you think about like volatility, uncertainty,
Yep.
complexity, and ambiguity, that's how you can define the world that's out there.
Right.
When we team, when we get together, we're actually forming a structure, because we think that by having this structure between us, we can more efficiently counteract the VUCA world. We can more efficiently counteract the volatility, the uncertainty. So just wanted to take that high level view and say a team or an organization, a government, a business, your family, you yourself, you are all structures that are designed to interact against this uncertainty, for example. And if you do it well, you're going to generate profit or well-being or wellness or service, right? And if you don't do that efficiently, it's going to come at a cost, and so you're going to contract. So what I think of teams or businesses as these structures that expand or contract against this environment of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right?
Gotcha. So
Does that make sense?
yeah, absolutely. So what exactly is the link to neuroscience, which is where you guys come into that, enabling that agility? What does that look like?
Yeah, can I tell you a story about it?
Yeah, that's great. We love stories, man. Keep lots of stories is good.
Okay, so imagine you've got a structure. Could be a team, okay?
Yep.
Could be a business, could be a whole business. Your structure has two parts. It's got your whatever you're doing with it, like your function. For example, like you could have a bakery. Well, that's the function of that structure is to produce bread. Or you could have the internet. The function of the structure is to connect people. Then you also have your people and the environment at which they operate. So let's call that your culture.
Yep.
So each business or the government has also a culture. That's where people are. That's where people are interacting. When you look at a structure, the only part that what I call is that they have creative agency is the people. It's the people that have the creative agency. It's the people that are making choices. The people make choices on the structure itself, or the people make choices on the environment in which they operate, right? So we take a technology company, maybe a software company. You've got the structure of a software company, which is the function is the software.
Yep.
And within that, there's the culture. The culture has the environment and the people. The people have the creative agency. The people are making the choices. it is then important for us to consider how those people are making those choices. Remember how I told you, like, I saw 3 opportunities? We should consider how people are making choices in the most scientific way possible, because it's through science that we can figure out like a measurable, fact-based, developing model to make those choices in a better way. Does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
That's where neuroscience comes in. Could we ask neuroscience, hey, for all that you've discovered about the brain, about the way that our organism works, and knowing that there's an environment out there that's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, is there a way that through evolution, through looking at us, we can maximize our potential to create these structures in the most effective way? We can maximize our choice, our creative function, our creative agency. And that's when in my career, at that point when I had that question, that's when I met the About My Brain Institute and the work of Silvia Damiano. Because she says, well, yes, there are 4 main abilities of which I'm going to talk to you about, that are abilities that are innate, that we've discovered and that you all know about, that can be then developed to create, for example, the competency of agility. And there are actually, if we take that bird's eye view of the VUCA world, there are 4 main competencies that we want. It's not actually just agility. We also want the competency of performance. We want the competency of collaboration. We want the competency of innovation, and we want the last part, the competency of agility, which I'm going to focus on that one today because it's a topic of your conversation. I wanted to tell you that we've evolved to have also performance, collaboration, innovation, and agility as the main competencies that counteract the VUCA world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, that's interesting. So do you want to go into the detail around the agility piece in terms of what it does take?
Yes. So if we delve deeper, we're trying to say, okay, if there's a lot of uncertainty in the environment, we then need to develop the competency of agility. We then look at the world of neuroscience. We look at the work that the About My Brain Institute is doing, and they're telling us the main ability that you want to develop in this case is the ability of intuition.
Right.
Intuition, according to them, is the ability to know something without the involvement of conscious reasoning.
Okay.
Think of it yourself, Munish, like when you've been in a situation that's been very uncertain, how do you make a decision? How do you use your own intuition to move quickly? Yep. You're not using your rational thought in that case. You're using your intuitive nature. Can you think of anything of any decision that you've done?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is. I mean, you're right. It's almost like there's not enough data to make a decision because you don't know enough data. It's not there. Mm-hmm. So really, ultimately, this is what I keep hearing about. The best leaders in the business are highly intuitive leaders, because there's no data, they go with the gut feel. And what you're talking about, intuition, is very much the gut feel to some degree as well, right? You got to really bank on it, even though you don't know whether it's the right call or not. You just got to go with what feels right. Is that right?
It feels right. Yes. In fact, like when you look at the research we've done, so many big decisions are done based on this feeling, comes from our gut, right?
Correct.
And you're like, wow, that intuition, that feeling is making us be really agile in an environment that there's not enough information, and it either feels right or it doesn't feel right. It's not a conscious reasoning, right? It's something else. And neuroscience is telling us that something else is an extremely valuable and valid way of thinking in an environment that is uncertain. In fact, through millions of years of evolution, we've developed that ability as a way to counteract the uncertainty. It's already there. You don't need a psychological theory to figure this out. It's something that's happening to each one of us when we're uncertain. Intuitions come up. For example, like when I joined them, and I started working with the About My Brain Institute, I it just felt right. I'm only now, nearly a year later, discovering how right it actually was for me.
Yeah.
But at first, it was just an intuitive. I didn't have all the data. I'm accumulating the data 6 months later, right? A year later.
Right.
If you look deeper into the neuroscience of it, you're talking about actually a physiological state. When you have an intuition, it's not in your brain, it's in your gut, and it's in your heart. It happens better if you're in an environment. Remember how I told you about the structure has the people and the environment?
Yep.
It happens better in an environment where there's less stress, because intuitions are gentle, right? They're like there's something that when you wake up in the morning, sometimes you have an intuition about something, or it's your first thought. You have to catch them. They're like
Very subtle.
very subtle. I'm just looking. My partner left me this flower. They're like this. They're so soft. It's like you almost can't disturb it. You have to just look at them and go, okay, I'm gonna make a decision based on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We've found out that a healthy gut is very important in creating these intuitive thoughts. In fact, there's something called the enteric nervous system. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which is we're understanding that the gut has a brain in itself with more than 100 million neurons, and that contrary to how we were thinking, the brain is not sending information down into the gut, but the gut is sending you information back up through the vagus nerve up into the brain.
Right.
How interested in that is that there's a brain in our gut that's giving us intuitive thought up through the vagus nerve up to the brain for us to make a rational decision with it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
There was a comment there from Melanie around would you call that heart intelligence as well? Or is that a separate?
Actually, yes, thank you, Melanie, because it will go up through the gut. It will also use there's a set of neurons that envelop the heart, and the heart will also play a big role in our intuitive nature. And it all works through the same system, goes all the way up into the brain. And it's not the brain dictating downwards what it wants. It's actually these organs dictating upwards, and they are a way faster, more intuitive way of thinking that neuroscience knows now for a long time. Especially if you look at the work of Antonio Damasco, for example, that it's a very valid, natural way of thinking for us, especially in a time of uncertainty. So to me, I was like, wow, what you really want in a time of uncertainty is that everybody in your structure, whether it's a team or a family or a business, you really want them all to be highly intuitive.
Yes.
That's it. That's what you want to be able, and it led me to think about how do we scale this? How do we scale that? Imagine if the whole company had high degrees of intuition. Would that be a better or a worse company to deal with uncertainty? It'd be a better company, right?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
And so that's where I think that there's a teaching piece here. The way that I think about it is we want to scale certain we want to achieve certain competencies. We want to perform, we want to collaborate, we want to innovate, and we want to be agile especially for uncertainty.
Yep.
For that, we need to develop different abilities. The ability of intuition is the key one for agility. You guys can look at all of this if you research Silvia Damiano and you look at her work and the work that the Institute is doing. There's a whole model to this that is fascinating, how they've been able to allocate what are the natural abilities that we already have as humans that are specifically designed to help us perform, collaborate, to be agile. Intuition is just the most important one in the category of agility.
Yeah, right.
But we want to be able to scale that across all our people. So I think that there's a big knowledge component, because when you look at what neuroscience is telling us is, well, you need to learn about your gut, you need to learn about your heart, you need to learn about how the different chemicals in the body are produced to give you those intuitions, and you need to learn about getting into a state of awareness where you're able to listen to your intuitive thought without judgment. So all of that is what the neuroscience, the tools can bring to you, and you need to scale that knowledge across your whole company.
All right, I hear you. Okay.
The interesting thing, if I can tell you my own personal story, in the past year, since learning more about this, for example, I've completely changed my diet. And it was interesting for me to figure out, would I therefore be more intuitive? And the answer is yes. I can measure it. I can tell you how I measure it later on, because that's kind of like the last problem that I wanted to solve. But yes, I can measure it. But more importantly, for example, in the time of COVID, when we've had a lot of uncertainty going on, I've definitely noticed a big difference between how the person that I am today, with changes in my gut, in my vitality, thanks to that, with the ability to understand that intuition is a way of thinking, how that's been able to help me navigate this time. I would, at face value, I would say more efficiently than some of my colleagues, because they're trying to make a rational decision where they need to make an intuitive one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think too much dependence on rational thinking is, can have its not always the perfect answer. But in my own experience, rarely has my gut proved me wrong. So
Right.
I get what you're saying around intuition, because it's always been spot on, 100%.
And anyone in the audience can check that.
Yeah.
Like, when you listen to your gut, how many times has it actually been wrong?
Yeah.
It collects all of the information that you've lived in this lifetime, and it brings it back to you in the form of one precise intuition. It's beautiful. It's a completely valid way of thinking. And you can enhance that. You can enhance that through taking better care of your gut, through de-stressing your environment. I think that if we're talking about teams and leaders and structures, what you really want to do is you want to transfer that knowledge. So you want to make sure that everybody understands that intuition, what it is, how do you get more of it, how do you create an environment that supports it. So you need to systematically increase the level of knowledge on this across all your people, right? And so there are some resources for that we've collected. There's a ton of resources for that also online. And so it's more, I think, as a leader, if you want to create a structure that is highly agile, you want to create people that are highly knowledgeable around the issue, around the ability of intuition. Yeah. That's going to give you the agility. That's then going to give you the ability to then go against uncertainty.
Correct. Because at the end of the day, everyone has access to the data, but it's how you use the data and what decisions you make based on the data, which is really going to give you the edge. That's going to say the data's everywhere. Yeah. There's no shortage of information. And it's assimilating the information and make sense making of the information, which is actually going to get you the outcome you're looking for. And that comes down, and the stronger the intuition, the better the decision making capability. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And now you can scale that because you can make your whole company very intuitive, right? Yeah, right. Just understand how to do it. Get the knowledge, research it, deploy that knowledge across all your people, get them to be highly intuitively. And actually, for me, I told you about 3 problems. I feel like we've touched upon. So first, this is a journey, right? Get people to be more intuitive. It happens gradually through time. The thing that you need to understand about the brain is that it's like, how when you go running, you get better over time. You can run longer, and any muscle. The brain is the same. Your nervous system will get better, more intuitive over time, as long as you develop that ability. It will also, there are other abilities that you might want to develop as a leader that also get better over time. So I love it because we're no longer talking about gigs or no. This is about systematically develop the ability of intuition across your people that makes your whole organization more agile. The other thing that you need to know is, if you're going to embark on this journey, is how to measure it. For example, an interesting question is, in times of uncertainty, wouldn't you want the most intuitive people to be making the decisions, the most intuitive leaders? Well, how do you know who they are? You need to be able to measure that. You need to be able to say, okay, well, wow, in this case, why don't John, Bob, and Wendy, why don't you guys make the decision, because you're highly intuitive people, because we're in a time of uncertainty. That's it. So there's something that you need to do in order to measure your ability to be intuitive. And if you look at some of the resources that the neuroscience committee has, or what we've developed at the About My Brain Institute, that's what some of the offering is. Hey, let's help you measure it so that you know that as you're increasing the knowledge, that in fact you're developing these abilities. It would be no different than getting fitter, going to the gym, and measuring how much weight you can handle. Well, intuition is a similar thing. It's an ability, can be measured. Let's measure it.
Got it.
Because you talk about leadership, and it's very important that leaders, if we have unintuitive leaders in a time of uncertainty, no, we need to be able to measure, who are our intuitive leaders. Can we let them decide at this time?
Okay. That's good. So moving on, I think the other piece you had around, helping agility is the awareness piece. Is that right?
Yeah. So actually, if you guys look at I asked Manish to send people some handouts,
Yeah.
and the main ability that you want to develop is intuition. Awareness is the second one. So if you, when you look into Sylvia Damiano's work, you go through each competency, the competency of agility. She explains the different abilities that you're looking to develop. There's intuition as the main one for agility. Then there's awareness. Awareness is be able to be conscious of our inner world. It fits really well into intuition because it's about that time of silence, right? When we are looking inside and trying to figure out what's my gut telling me, what's my brain telling me, right? Being able to be mindful, open to feedback. I would even explain, the more, just going back to the more I fixed my gut and my heart, and the more that I've developed peripheral vision, right? It's very interesting, more awareness about your inner world, including also your artwork. Another ability that's important for you to develop across your whole structure, team or a business, is your ability to influence.
Right.
How can you influence with that intuition? How can you influence so that you're agile? You can have a decision, but you need to be able to influence that decision onto others very quickly, right? In order to be more agile. So the ability to influence, and then the ability to adapt, right? To adjust to changes in our environment, to self-correct, to be versatile. And that's just, if you think about it, as your brain structures, if they're used to change, that's also an ability that you can develop. There are people that are just highly adaptable, and they've trained themselves to be very adaptable. And so we can develop our brain in a way that becomes very adaptable, that is very easy to deal with uncertainty. And you see that in the different sports. Sports that have a high degree of variability will have people that have very adaptable brains. Very simple.
Yeah, I hear you. So just coming back to one of the questions we have is, how do you create the balance between the whole rational thinking and the intuitive thinking? And, it's almost telling the difference between the two sometimes. It's quite hard to understand, is this my intuition talking, or is this my head or my rational thoughts telling me something? And I struggle with that sometimes, is to know what is the difference between the two. Is there any insights you can share around how we could... we need both to make a decision, obviously. But like we said, the key decisions come from the gut. But I don't know, is that my gut, or is that actually my brain speaking?
Yeah, it's interesting. So here's where this is the knowledge piece, right? I'll give you my personal answer, and I think I would encourage all of you to go and look at the research on some of this, right? Look at some of the materials that we've got that will teach you all of this. It's super easy. I'll tell you my personal answer. So the way that I think about it, based on what I've learned, is my brain is operating within polarity. It's telling me right and wrong, right? And so when I'm really worried about making a decision, you sort of like want to stop and see, okay, I know that the energy is really up here. I can't control my brain. It's thinking about all these different, this is right, and it's very binary. It's thinking yes or no, right or wrong. I tend to do a few deep breaths and slowly put my heart put my hand in my heart and bring the awareness to that heart area, or even put the other hand in your gut and to that gut area, and just helping your own, because you can put your awareness in different things. You want to bring that awareness down into
Right.
this area. As you do that, you will see that the thought, the intuition, you're going to have a different kind of thought. It's a more intuitive thought that's going to come up into your field of view or into your mind. This thought that's going to come up, it's not going to be a yes or no thought. It's going to feel more unified. The heart always thinks as it's a more unified, it's more of a one. The answer is more of an answer that it's giving you. It's more of an intuition that it's giving you. And so you'll see there's actually a difference. You'll experience a difference as you start to come down and ask the question, but ask it and then maybe even press your hand, look into this area of your body, or look into the gut area of your body. It'll be slightly different. What I would counsel you to do is don't judge it. Sometimes what I do is I just write it down. I write it down because there's a split second until your mind reactivates and starts to see, like, is that real? There's like this, and then you're caught up in that again. So you want to sort of write it down. In fact, there's musicians that say, the moment that I judge the music that I'm creating, I'm no longer creating. It's no longer flowing, right? And so they sort of like they record it and then they listen to it later for judgment, not while they're doing it.
Yeah, I hear you. So, and another question is, is there an example? Could you tell an intuitive decision versus a data-based decision? Is it because it'll be contrary, or is there a way of identifying the difference between the two when it's actually made, when a decision is made? Because people don't see whether it's coming from intuition or. I mean, sometimes it's obvious, I guess, because they're like, "Where'd you get that from?"
Right.
Or is it quite straightforward to know the difference between the two when the decision's been made? Is it obvious?
So I think once the decision's been made, if you're just observing the decision, I'm not sure how you would be able to tell. It's up if the person making the decision hasn't told you. Yeah. But if we take like a real business scenario, like, let's just say, when do people come back to the office? Something that people are talking about right now, right? Mm-hmm. When do people come back to the office? Well, have we got any data? Probably not. We can collect some of the data. So this is the data that we've got available. There's an ambiguous amount of data. That's where then you have to use your thumb and your intuition and go, okay, I need to make a decision because I need to say something to my team, So I'm just going to say September, October, whatever comes up. Yeah, but you can't then say, is that right or not? That's an intuitive decision. Actually, if you guys can all check that now, if you think of, when will we be able to go back to the beach all together? Your heart is gonna come up with some random date for that, and that's your intuition telling you, and that's it. There's no more than that. As things get better and you get more data, you might want to change that and add, okay, well, it's not October, it's November, and actually it's November 3rd, maybe.
Got it.
But for now, all you have to go with is that intuition. Around October is when we're going to be able to go to the beach. Perhaps, might be right, might be wrong, but the important thing is that you've made an intuitive decision. You can now move on and go on with your day much more. So now you're more agile.
Yeah.
Right.
You make a call. Yeah. Awesome.
Call.
I like your point there about influence. Because right now, everyone's working from home, and you're not bumping into people. You can't step into somebody's office. You can't really have a chat in the corridor, in the coffee room, or a water cooler. So, how does the influence piece work? What do you recommend there? How do people can have more influence on their stakeholders and on their peers and on their teams?
So I think that. In this particular case, when we are talking about these different abilities, intuition, awareness, influence, adaptability, I think I would do a disservice to Servi Damiano's work if I went so deep into them
Okay.
when they require this, they require more of they require more. It's deep knowledge, you know.
Sure.
This is something that is. Remember how I was talking to you? I saw an opportunity to do real work. The
Yes.
real work is to actually really learn about this in detail, and
Correct.
it'll take a little bit of time to do so.
Okay.
I think my message to you and to the people that are reading is the the journey that I went on led me to understand that there are ways that we could scale these abilities across a whole company.
Right.
There are ways in which we could measure if we're doing it right or wrong. That we could that because your topic is leadership and uncertainty.
Right.
When you look at the leadership piece, I think that if we could create systems, and the systems is what we're discovering. I've discovered how could we systematically deploy intuition across a whole company, influence across a whole company.
Right.
How can we make it sustainable? And it's not just those will grant you agility, but then there's also innovation. How could we? There are abilities that we develop, like the ability of imagination, that helps us with innovation, performance, integration. There are a whole set of abilities that we should be looking at systematically developing within our structures, within our people structures. If we do that, that's real leadership, because it's not just the leader at the top that suddenly becomes hyper intuitive, hyper aware. No, it's everybody's developing these abilities, and we're able to measure across the whole company. Okay, last year we scored a 60 in them. This year we scored a 70. Then when the next crisis comes, guess what? We've got a structure of people that are highly intuitive, that are going to make decisions within the function of that business, that are going to be extremely agile decisions. And so we're going to generate tons of well-being. Really, I think that the call, when you say leadership, the call is for everybody to develop these abilities, for everybody to become more intuitive, more influential, more, and I think that they should do it systemically. Systemically means that you follow the scientific the scientific method, that you measure yourself today, that you then increase your knowledge on these abilities, and that you make decisions that change your environment, and then you measure again, and then you learn more about it, and you then make different decisions for yourself. You change your environment. So for example, like the more that I learned about intuition, the more that I learned that I should change my diet. So I did, and then I measured again, and I became more intuitive, and so on and so forth. And that we should do it systematically across the whole company. That creates a culture, a kind of culture that we like to call that brain friendly. It's a culture that is leveraging the natural abilities that exist across in our own brains, in our own personas, that evolution has given us, and expanding them. Just as you develop your body and you become fitter, you can develop your ability of intuition. That makes you more agile. Your ability of imagination makes you more innovative. Your ability of inspiration makes you more collaborative, and you can integrate your body better, makes you perform better. You'll do that across everyone. You create a culture that is perfect to work in the VUCA world, right? That generates profitability.
I hear you. So I totally get the big picture from a transformation and the culture perspective. I guess if you were to break it down into more tangible actions that individual leaders could do from a doing day-to-day perspective to drive that culture, what were some of your thoughts in terms of what does the doing involve for the leaders that are wanting to start with their teams in the first place, start for themselves? What are some immediate steps people can take just on the short term to actually get some traction around agility?
So I think the most important thing that I found is to figure out one framework that you're going to use to define these things and stick with it. So for example, it's not, okay guys, this year we're doing intuition, and then next year we're doing something else, and then we're bringing someone in with agile learning. No, it's intuition this year, intuition next year, intuition the year after. We're going to increase our awareness, our knowledge, our measurement. All of that is going to work better, because leaders tend to. It's better that we stick to one philosophy and we develop it than we not that we keep changing these philosophies. And the best philosophy that you can stick to is the one that closest resembles the body that you already have, the system that you already have. That's why neuroscience might be the key, because neuroscience is saying it's not a theory. We're able to measure. You have the ability to be intuitive. That's it. It's no theory. This is what it is, you know? And so the closest that you can get to the truth and not just a concept, the better the framework is. So as a leader, I would choose a framework. They can look at R1, or there are others out there, and stick to it. And then measure, increase knowledge, make decisions. Measure, increase knowledge, make decisions.
Right.
In terms of agility, if you think about your own process, your own process for intuition, your own process for awareness or influence, one thing that I've seen in teams is that they don't really create this de-stressed environment where it's valid to make an intuitive decision, even though at the end of the day that's what you're doing. But there's not a lot of awareness or acknowledging around this. And so I'd probably work on that.
I hear you. That makes sense. So really what you're saying is that it's almost the more you can tailor the program or the frameworks that are innate, like you said earlier, it comes naturally to people, the easier it is then for them to adopt it and to use it day to day, versus trying to impose an external thing which they have to, really learn and kind of remember or memorize or whatever it is that they need to do. Whilst if it was something that comes more naturally to them, you'll get higher engagement and actually get buy-in to do it, because everybody has it, such as intuition.
Yeah, it's so simple, right? Yes. Like for years, I've been teaching models. And I'm like, well, you have to learn the language from this model, and I'm like, people don't end up learning it, unfortunately. The model's great. They just never get it, And so it's only until I came across this work that I was like, oh, you guys, you're not telling us to learn a model. You're telling us to use our natural intuition, and you're going to increase our ability to do so. And by doing so, we're naturally going to make more agile, more intuitive decisions that are going to lead to a more agile framework. And like I said, not just intuition. That's just agility. That's just if you're in a time of uncertainty.
Yes.
If you're in a time of high certainty, then the competency of performance and your ability to integrate and really work hard is what you want to develop. So there are all these different abilities that are natural. So you don't need to learn a system. All you need to is enhance your own neural leadership. You enhance your own neural leadership. That's what it is.
I see. So really, what you're saying, to actually the most powerful tool sort of to deal with the uncertainty issue is really intuition out of the framework that you have there within the About My Brain Institute. Is that what you're saying? Is that the most powerful?
Yes, because that will develop the competency of agility. Wow. That will make you really agile. People that are highly intuitively are highly agile. Simple, right? So if you have that way, you don't have to second guess a model. You can just say, okay, I'll develop the intuition of my people. As uncertainty comes in, they'll be agile, they'll be fine, right? We'll make the best decisions. So we'll create a structure or a culture that is naturally agile if we have people that are really intuitive. And so someone's like, go to the intuition gym, right? And go get it, right?
Yeah, I get it. Totally get it. So what are the other things in terms of from an intuition perspective that you think it's critical for people to know around to how do you cultivate more of it so that they get better and better at it? I get the silence piece, the mindfulness piece potentially is obviously the rage now. Everyone's talking about mindfulness. What other things would you recommend people to really build that intuitive capability? Because, when there's fear, it's almost the hardest thing to do is actually take time out to listen to your intuition, because the fear is so overpowering. So yeah, I'd love to hear any more thoughts you have on how to.
Yeah. So we can probably actually do this together. So because think of these abilities as being developed in the same way that you would go on and you'd go to the gym to develop your fitness, right?
Yep.
So we're gonna go and develop our intuition somewhere, right? Intuitive thinking could be developed through maybe even playing games where you're required a high degree of intuition. The thing is that you've got the same brain whether you're playing a game or you're doing business. So if you're developing the ability of intuition by playing a game where you really need to figure stuff out, there's not a lot of data, right? And so you're making decisions on the spot, you're being agile, that requires high amounts of intuition. Well, then your brain starts to develop just like a muscle. It's just like going to the gym. You know, the gym is not a battlefield. The gym's the gym. But then you use the same muscle in the battlefield, right? So you become more intuitive, perhaps by playing an intuitive game. You know, I do a lot of dancing. Dancing is a highly intuitive activity, right? Where you don't have enough time to think. So you need to react to changes in the environment, in your partner, and everybody around you, very intuitive. And you don't really know what's the next move that's going to come up. And so that, plus the changes in diet, all of that have made me a highly intuitive person. Now, when COVID comes, and when I'm faced with having to make very quick, agile decisions about it, well, I'm highly intuitive. What's the problem? I've evolved to have this ability, and I've developed that ability. So I just go ahead and use it. It's not. I don't need to look at any framework. It just happens, right?
Yeah, right. Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
For people that, if you look at some of the other ones, like, because we've talked about the VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, complexity, and ambiguity. And we've talked about we need to develop performance, we need to develop collaboration, we need to develop what's the other one? Performance, collaboration, innovation, and agility, right? If we think about one of the others, like innovation, that's where imagination comes in. So you could be in the evenings developing your ability to imagine by going to art class, for example, right? Creating new things. And that same ability, your brain starts to create these neural pathways. Those pathways are available to you when you then are leading the team or working in your business or working as a team member. Same pathway. Then you become highly imaginative as a person. There's this thing that I've learned, beautiful concept called neuroplasticity, which is that we, just as our muscles are our body, we can develop them. So does our brain. Our brain can develop these abilities. In fact, when we look at some of the best leaders, we do. I told you before that we do measurement on this, and so we're able to measure if somebody is more intuitive, less intuitive, better perform, all of this stuff. So when we look at some of the best leaders and we measure them, they measure highly on these abilities across the board, and we know they're great leaders. That's how you get them. What you really want, though, is to have that across the whole company. That's gold, because no matter what comes, if it's an environment that is more ambiguous, then you have one of the abilities. If you have an environment that is volatile, then you have another ability. You want to develop these abilities to counteract whatever changes in your environment are happening.
Interesting. And just want to check in with the audience as well. If there's any questions, please share it on the chat. I think we might have one here. Use the intuition. What should I have for breakfast? Green apple or sugar bagel? Feel how your gut and heart feels, then start using the intuition in complex decisions. So yeah, she's basically saying is that how to use your intuition in daily decision making, like simple thing as having what do I have for breakfast. So I mean, is it almost like do you just make a game out of that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. So whenever you don't have enough data to make this rational decision, and I would say even when you do, you might have all the data in the world. You can still check in with your intuition. It might tell you, you know what, do it this other way, like, but you want to always do this check. In fact, what you're really looking for is there's another concept in Sylvia's framework, in Sylvia Damiano's framework, that's talking about integration. And what you're really looking for is to have this integrated approach to decision making. That's maybe like our highest way of doing it, which is our gut is saying yes. Intuition says yes, it's right. Our heart is open. We're feeling great about it, joyous about it. So we're happy. We're like, yes, this feels great.
Yeah.
Feels great, and actually, our heart is expressing that greatness, and our mind is telling us, you know what? I've thought it through, and I reckon it's the right thing to do. Perfect. Yeah. Then you've got, because there's actually 3 brains in our system. Then you've got your 3 brains all integrated, all telling you, that's the right thing to do, right?
So there's a question is in from Mel again around. So would you recommend extracurricular activities for, as well as team exercises to help employees develop their intuition?
Yeah. Can I? That's a great question. Could I dig a little bit deeper onto this one?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you want to systematically develop the right abilities in your employees, because you know that you want to create a structure that is highly agile, highly performing, highly collaborative, highly innovative. Like, that's what you want. And so you know that the environment that your people are in, people are the ones making the decision. The environment plays a very important role in doing this. So the more that the employer, and we see this in these new companies that are coming up that really take care of the environment around the employee, they're doing really well. Yeah. So the more that the employer can create an environment that supports the development of these abilities, and we can teach them how. This is extremely important. If in your environment the environment supports less stressful culture, if the food, there are many companies that are now providing you food, but if the food is gut-friendly food, that will also create the right neurochemicals, so you don't have to then supplement that with all sorts of like coffee and pills and stuff, but then your body can naturally produce the chemicals that you want. Things like that. There's so many strategies, but yes, I would say to all the leaders, you need to create an environment that supports these abilities. They don't happen by themselves. There's decisions that are personal decisions about how you might develop those abilities for yourself. And as an employer, your employee spends a lot of time with you, and you need to create an environment that is supportive of those abilities, including extracurricular activities. Yeah, especially if they are directed towards a certain ability. For example, I was listening to Ray Dalio, and he's saying that he provides mindfulness and meditation areas within his company. Great, amazing, because that is one of the ways that you develop awareness. Great, mindfulness meditation has shown to really help with that. There's more once you understand. That's why we teach the neuroscience behind it, because what we do is, once you understand the neuroscience behind it, the knowledge of how to develop these abilities, it's very easy from then as an employer to go, oh, I know what decisions to make. I know how to create an environment that supports that, Yeah,
I hear you. So I think it's a good piece around, give an example is in our offices, and Kara, you know this, is that we play games. We'll have game nights, and we'll have like 4:30 to 6 p.m. We'll have game nights and play an online computer game with 12 other guys in the office, and I'm, all millennials, tech company. So, and I catch myself almost thinking through some answers rather than putting my first intuitive answer. In a game, and the moment when I think it through, actually I don't get the result I want in the game. I don't win it. So it's actually a great learning, because I get thinking, how can I put that intuitive answer? That's so weird and that's stupid. but actually that's the one that wins the game, you know. And
Yes.
I look at the winner who actually wins the award game, or whatever the word they put up is actually the just first thing that's come to their mind. And I need to cultivate that. And that's your point around the game playing. You start let silly things happen, because that's really where creativity takes place.
Yes, exactly. Or I remember like when you and I went out during COVID, you and I went out for a long walk, right?
Yeah.
Great, because we were intuitive, we were discussing themes, we were feeling our way. It's led to a whole bunch of business opportunities for both of us, right?
Correct.
And that just happened in a very intuitive sense. We had to sort of feel our way through it. And yes, it happens better in there's this company that I went to visit that had all of these walkways around the forest, around their offices, that they specifically created because they knew that there are certain things that are happening that only happen when people go to walks in nature, you know? And so that's where like the neuroscience, it looks like, oh, how nice, they put a park. It looks like that. But when I actually started to interview the leaders, they were like, no, that was very deliberate.
Yeah.
We understand how the brain is working. The brain works better when you go out for a walk, you know? Super deliberate thing to do. Now we're reaping all the benefits of that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, we're almost out of time, so just want to check in. If any more questions, please share that. But is there anything you'd like to finish off with, Jesus? Is there something that you want to really highlight before we wrap up?
I'd like to inspire people to systematically embed neuroscience, these abilities across the whole company. It's totally possible with today's technology to do that. And it's just, I feel just like, imagine that all your employees become athletes, but instead of athletes, they're not competing in sport, they're like leadership athletes. Like, treat them like that. You know, give them the right food, give them the right environment, give them the right activities, and their performance is just going to go up through the roof, you know? There's no reason why you should be working with someone and not achieve that level of finesse and expertise that a world-class athlete has. We're doing no different. We're sort of not living up to our potential if we don't treat ourselves like that, treat ourselves as athletes. That's what I try to do. And we call that a neuro leader, but you can call it whatever you want. The point is that you're maximizing your human potential. And as a leader, look to do that for your people. It's going to pay back like big time for you. You have no idea, once you develop the imagination of your people, the intuition of your people, the performance, you have no idea how that's going to then end up in the choices and the decisions that they make. It's going to be the right ones to give you the profitability, the well-being, the wellness that you're looking for in your company.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much. Well, that's pretty much almost all we have time for. Thanks so much, Jesus. Thank you all for tuning in again. Really grateful for your time. Hopefully you found this session really worthwhile and learned some new things from it. Really thankful for Jesus for giving me his time today as well. I know he put a lot of preparation into it. So thank you, Jesus, for that. We look forward to welcoming you back again on Wednesday at 12 o'clock for the next series. In the meantime, have a great week, and thanks for joining us again. Thank you.
Ciao, everyone.